The town of Millbrook wasn't much more than a dot on the map, an old railway stop no one really needed anymore, where the trains passed by but never stopped. Its streets curved in lazy bends, lined with peeling wooden porches and half-forgotten storefronts that smelled faintly of dust and motor oil. Nothing extraordinary ever happened here, and maybe that was why everyone remembered the night he arrived. It was late autumn when the stranger walked into Millbrook. The air was sharp with the scent of wet leaves, and the mist from a nearby marsh rolled across the single highway that fed into town. People at Sam's Diner, the only place open past 9, swore they saw him through the glass before the bell above the door jingled. He looked ordinary. Too ordinary, in fact, as though he had been pulled from someone else's memory and dropped there. His coat was a little too long. His hat shadowed most of his face, and he carried a single leather satchel that looked worn from decades of travel. "Evening," he said, voice soft but steady. Maggie, the waitress who had worked there since her teens, felt a chill dance up her arms. Something in the way he looked around, measured, unhurried, made her uneasy. Customers trickled in and out all the time, but this man had the aura of someone who wasn't just passing through. To understand why his arrival mattered, you'd have to know the people who filled Millbrook's quiet corners. There was Sheriff Henry Clay, a man well past his prime but respected by everyone. He carried his years with a kind of quiet dignity, though his hand shook just a little when he thought no one was watching. His greatest pride was his daughter, Emily, who had inherited her mother's wit and her father's stubborn streak. Emily Clay had returned to town after college, taking a temporary job at the library. She was restless, though Millbrook felt too small, too stifling for someone who had read as much as she had. She dreamed of bigger things, though she couldn't name what exactly. Then there was Sam, the diner owner. His laughter filled the room on good nights, but he had a habit of watching strangers too closely, as if waiting for trouble. Millbrook had been his cage and his refuge. He'd grown up there, lost his wife there, and decided to stay put. And finally, there was Maggie, the one who first noticed the stranger's eyes. She was plain-spoken, quick with sarcasm, but she never ignored instinct, and instinct told her something was off. The stranger chose a booth in the corner. He ordered black coffee, nothing else. Maggie set the cup down and tried to catch a better look at his face, but he kept the brim of his hat tilted low. "You passing through?" she asked. "Maybe," he murmured and smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Sheriff Clay came in not long after, stomping the coal from his boots. He tipped his hat at Maggie, greeted Sam, and glanced at the stranger. Something flickered across his weathered face. Recognition, maybe, or suspicion, but it vanished before anyone could pin it down. The diner felt heavier that night, as though the walls were leaning closer, listening. In the days that followed, odd things began to happen in Millbrook. Lights flickered in houses that had been abandoned for years. Dogs barked at nothing, their hackles raised. Emily, walking home from the library, swore she heard footsteps trailing her, measured, deliberate, but when she turned, the street was empty. And through it all, the stranger remained. He rented the attic room above the general store, paid in cash, and drifted through town like a shadow. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words had weight. People found themselves listening longer than they intended, forgetting what they had meant to say. Maggie told Sam she caught him staring at the old courthouse one evening, his lips moving like he was whispering to someone unseen. Sam dismissed it, but Maggie couldn't shake the image. Sheriff Clay began asking questions. Who was this man? Where had he come from? Why Millbrook, of all places? But no one knew. The stranger had no car, no identification anyone had seen. Just that satchel, always kept close, never opened in public. One night, the sheriff tried to make casual conversation at the diner. "Strange weather we've been having," Clay said, sliding into the booth across from him. The stranger's lips curled into something between a smile and a smirk. "Strange times, Sheriff." Something in the way he said it made the sheriff's throat tighten. Emily, restless as always, decided to strike up her own conversation. She found the stranger in the library late one afternoon, standing in the history section, fingers gliding across the spines as if he already knew each title. "Are you looking for something?" she asked. He turned slowly, and she saw his face more clearly than anyone else had. His eyes were pale, unnaturally so, like glass marbles that caught too much light. "Just reminded myself," he said. "Of what?" He smiled then, and Emily felt a shiver crawl down her back. That even small towns have ghosts. 2 weeks after his arrival, the first person vanished. It was Old Man Wilkins, who lived alone on the edge of town. Folks figured he wandered off, maybe got lost in the marsh. But Maggie was the one who found his front door wide open, kettle still whistling on the stove, as if he had stepped outside for only a second and never returned. The sheriff searched. Dogs were brought out, but no trace of Wilkins was ever found. And through it all, the stranger sat at his corner booth at the diner, sipping his black coffee, calm as still water. The storm had rolled in heavier by nightfall, rain lashing against the glass windows with an anger that rattled the old wooden frames of the inn. The power flickered twice before going out completely, leaving only the dim glow of lanterns the innkeeper had hurriedly lit. It was in this darkness that the stranger first made his presence known. He had arrived earlier in the day, quiet, unnoticed. No one remembered the moment he entered. Yet by dinner he was there, seated at the far end of the long oak table, had still drawn despite the warmth of fire. His plate remained untouched, but his hands, pale, long-fingered, rested flat against the wood, as though anchoring himself in place. No one dared ask who he was. Instead, conversation carried on in nervous bursts, laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. Abigail watched him from the corner of her vision. There was something about him, something not quite right. Daniel, barely 19, tried to mask his unease with bravado. He leaned closer to Abigail, whispering, "Don't you think it's odd? He hasn't said a word since supper began." Abigail glanced at the stranger. "Maybe he's just tired." "Tired doesn't make you look like that," Daniel muttered. And he wasn't wrong. The stranger's face, when he finally lifted his hood, was both striking and unsettling. Gaunt cheeks, hollow eyes the color of storm clouds, lips that curved in a faint smile that never moved higher than his mouth. His gaze swept the room slowly, deliberately, like a predator scanning prey. When their eyes met, Abigail felt something coiled tightly in her chest. Across the table, Margaret, a widow who had lost her husband only months ago, raised her wine glass with trembling fingers. She'd been quiet all evening, grief carving shadows beneath her eyes. Yet now she seemed transfixed by the stranger, unable to look away. He held her stare for a long moment before inclining his head in a gesture that could have been respect or possession. Margaret's breath caught audibly, and she lowered her glass without drinking. No one asked his name. No one dared. It was the innkeeper, Thomas, who finally broke the tension. "Stranger, you're welcome to the fire, but it'd ease our nerves if you told us where you're headed. Storm like this can turn travelers into ghosts." The man's smile widened, thin and sharp. His voice, when it came, was smooth but hollow, as though echoing from a deep cavern. "I have no destination. I go where I am called." No one moved. Even the fire seemed to sputter at his words. That night, none of the guests slept well. Doors creaked, though no one walked the halls. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. And though rain hammered the roof relentlessly, there were moments when every sound ceased, no wind, no storm, only silence so heavy it pressed on their chests. Abigail lay awake in her small room, candle flickering. She thought she heard footsteps outside her door, slow, measured, pausing right in front of her. She held her breath. Then nothing. When she dared open the door, the corridor was empty, but a single wet footprint marked the floorboards, trailing away toward Margaret's room. The storm would pass eventually, but the stranger? He had only just begun. The storm outside showed no mercy. The windows of Holloway House rattled like bones being shaken in a gambler's cup, and the fire snapped and hissed as though mocking the anxious faces around it. What had begun as a night of inconvenience, trapped in a remote mansion with a handful of strangers, was evolving into something else entirely. Because of him. The stranger. He sat in the great chair by the fire, his shadow stretching long across the room, his face half lit, half swallowed by darkness. His voice was calm, measured, Yet every word carried the weight of a predator circling prey. He wasn't telling stories. He was unraveling them. And the unsettling part? He seemed to know things he shouldn't. Eleanor tried to maintain her role as hostess, clinking the china, pouring tea into delicate cups. But her hands trembled. When the stranger's gaze fell on her, she faltered. "Such a generous hostess," he said softly. "And yet, how lonely these halls must be when the laughter fades." Her smile froze. The others may not have noticed, but he had struck something deep. Eleanor's husband had died years ago, alone in this very house. Few knew the truth of that night, the way his body had been found in the library. The coroner whispered about something strange. The stranger should not have known. Marcus adjusted his spectacles, feigning calm. The academic in him sought logic, explanations. "Coincidence," he muttered. But then the stranger tilted his head. "A man of books," he observed. "Yet books can't protect you from the knowledge you carry. Tell me, Marcus, do you still dream of the ruins?" Marcus's heart skipped. He had spent years studying forgotten civilizations, chasing whispers of rituals that blurred history and myth. He never told anyone about the dreams, visions of faces carved into stone, chanting in languages that made his ears bleed. He tightened his grip on the armrest. How could the stranger know? The firelight glinted on Clara's polished fingernails as she clasped her hands together. A pianist by profession, she carried herself with elegance, but inside she was unraveling. "Would you play for us?" the stranger asked. His tone was kind, almost tender. She hesitated. The last time she touched the piano had been that night, the performance where she had blacked out mid-song. When she awoke, the audience was screaming, not from applause, but from the violent convulsions of a man in the front row. He had died within minutes, foaming at the mouth. The papers blamed a heart attack. But Clara never forgot the look in his eyes, as though he had seen something behind her while she played. Now the stranger smiled faintly. "Play for us," he whispered. "Or are you afraid of what the music might summon this time?" Her blood turned to ice. Thomas sat stiff, fists clenched, jaw tight. He was not a man easily shaken. Yet every time the stranger's eyes flicked toward him, he felt stripped bare. "You've killed before," the stranger murmured. The words rang in the silence, too blunt, too certain. Thomas's face darkened. "I fought for my country." "Yes," the stranger replied, "but war does not absolve you of choice. And you know which life I speak of, the one that wasn't meant to be taken." Thomas's breathing quickened. No one here could possibly know about that night, his mistake, the boy in the rubble, the secret that haunted him still. He wanted to lash out, to silence the man, but something in the stranger's eyes rooted him to his seat. The fire crackled, the storm howled, and the stranger leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You see," he said smoothly, "this house is not a prison. You are not trapped here by chance. You are here because your secrets have teeth, and tonight they will gnash." The room grew colder, though the flames roared higher. Each guest sat paralyzed, the weight of their past pressing against their chests. They exchanged wary glances, yet no one spoke, because deep down each of them knew he was right. Clara's trembling hand reached toward the piano in the corner of the room, almost against her will. Eleanor set her cup down too hard, the china cracking. Marcus rubbed his temples, as though voices pressed against his mind. Thomas's fists were white-knuckled, and the stranger, he smiled. The house seemed to lean in, the shadows stretching closer, as though the very walls were listening. Something was about to break. The storm had not eased. Rain lashed at the windows like fingers trying to claw their way inside, and thunder rolled with such force it seemed to shake the bones of the house. No one had dared to leave the sitting room since the stranger entered, but no one had invited him to sit either. He chose his place carefully, a solitary armchair at the far end of the room, angled so that he could see all of them without turning his head. The fire spat angrily, but its warmth did not seem to touch him. His presence was like a void, swallowing every flicker of comfort. "Shall we play a game?" he said at last, his voice smooth but carrying a strange weight. Rebecca, her glass of wine trembling in her hand, tried to laugh it off. "What is this? Some kind of stormy night cliché?" The stranger tilted his head. "Call it an icebreaker." No one spoke. They didn't have to. The silence in that room wasn't born of politeness. It was born of fear. The stranger's eyes moved to Samuel, the successful businessman who had spent the night bragging about his latest deal before the storm cut the power. "Why don't you start?" the stranger suggested. "Tell him about the night you wish someone dead." Samuel stiffened. The others exchanged uneasy glances. "Excuse me," he said. "You remember," the stranger continued softly. "You were 17. That boy at school. The one who humiliated you in front of the girl you liked. You went home and prayed, actually prayed, that he wouldn't wake up the next morning." Samuel's face was drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The stranger leaned forward, the faintest trace of a smile curling his lips. And the next day, he didn't. The air grew heavy. Rebecca set her glass down too quickly, the sharp clink echoing like a gunshot. "How the hell do you know that?" Samuel finally managed, his voice raw. The stranger didn't answer. He simply leaned back, as if satisfied. Now the others stared at Samuel, their minds spinning. No one had ever heard that story before. Not his friends, not his colleagues, not even his wife. The stranger's eyes slid to the next guest. Clara, the quiet one. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as if she knew what was coming. "You," he said softly. "You still hear her, don't you? The baby you gave away." Clara's breath hitched. Her eyes filled instantly with tears. "Stop," she whispered. "She cries to you at night," the stranger went on, ignoring her plea. "You can almost hear her tiny fists against the nursery walls you never built." Clara broke, sobbing into her hands. Rebecca reached for her, but Clara recoiled, shaking her head violently. No one dared look at the stranger now. They were too busy drowning in the horror of what they'd just learned, that the man was not simply guessing. He knew, one by one. His gaze drifted to each of them, and though he hadn't yet spoken, the threat lingered in the air. Their secrets were not safe. Not here. Not anymore. He let the silence stretch until it suffocated them. Then, in a voice almost tender, he said, "You invited me in. Now you'll see why." The lights flickered once, twice, and then the room was plunged into complete darkness. The generator groaned once, then went completely still. The mansion sank into total darkness, a suffocating black that pressed in from every corner. Marjorie clutched the edge of her shawl, her voice trembling. Someone lit a candle. "Please." But no one moved. No one dared. Instead, they heard it, the faintest sound, a whisper, not loud, not clear, but enough to send a cold shiver along every spine. It slithered through the darkness like smoke, impossible to pin down. "Do you hear it?" Harriet gasped, clinging to Dr. Patel's arm. The whisper grew, words half-formed, drifting. Secrets, lies, debts unpaid. Lawrence stumbled backward, knocking into a table. Who said that? Who the hell said that? No one answered. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing across the room's wooden floor. But when Thomas struck a match, revealing the quivering flame of a candle, the space around them was empty. The stranger was nowhere to be seen. Each guest unravels. Evelyn, the quiet librarian, held her chest, whispering prayers under her breath. But the voice in the dark had called her name. Not once, but twice. She swore she hadn't told anyone about the scandal that forced her to leave her old town, yet the whisper hinted at it. Pages torn, words erased, hiding what you did. Harriet, who laughed too loudly to mask her nerves, now sat rigid. The footsteps had circled behind her chair. She was certain. "It brushed past me," she insisted. "It touched me." No one believed her, until a lock of her hair was tugged sharply by an unseen hand. Dr. Patel tried to keep control, but his polished calm began to crack. He thought he saw something in the corner, a shape leaning in the dark. When the candlelight flickered, it was gone, but the whisper came again. "Doctor, tell them what you've done, tell them who you let die." Lawrence drank from his flask, hands shaking. His debts, his failed business, his ruined family name. They'd followed him here. But how could the stranger know? How could it know about the night? He almost didn't come home at all. The candle flame sputtered, then died. Darkness again. And this time, the whisper wasn't scattered. It was sharp, close, as though someone's lips were just inches from their ears. "Every one of you is here for a reason." Evelyn screamed. Harriet begged for light. Lawrence cursed into the dark. The footsteps resumed, pacing around them. Slow, patient, mocking. Thomas lit another match, his hand trembling. But before the wick caught, he froze. Because standing at the far end of the table, illuminated only for a heartbeat, was the stranger. Still silent, smiling. Then darkness again. The air in the lodge was so heavy with silence, it felt like a living thing. No one dared move. No one dared breathe too loudly, for fear that the sound itself would draw the stranger closer. But the quiet didn't last. It began with a whisper. Not from the shadows this time. Not from behind the rotting wooden beams or the cracking fireplace. No, this whisper came from within. "I know what you did." All eyes turned toward Eliza, the youngest of the group, her hands trembling as she stared directly at Marcus, the wealthy investor. Her voice was barely above a hiss, but sharp enough to pierce the stillness. "You act like you're above all of us," she spat. "But I know why you're here. I know what you're hiding." Marcus blinked, startled. His usual smug confidence faltered. "What are you talking about?" But before he could say more, the stranger's footsteps creaked through the hallway upstairs. Slow, deliberate, measured, as though he were pacing, listening, waiting for the right moment to descend. The group froze, straining their ears. The footsteps stopped, and then a whisper from the ceiling beams above. "He's lying." It wasn't Eliza's voice. It wasn't Marcus's. It was the stranger's. Marcus shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. You're all letting this phantom drive you insane." His voice cracked, betraying the tremor beneath his words. But Eliza wouldn't back down. Her eyes were wide, almost feverish. "You paid to bury it, didn't you? That accident, the girl." The others shifted uncomfortably. None of them had known Marcus's past, but something about the way his face drained of color told them enough. And then the stranger's game deepened. From the corner of the room came a faint sound, like a sob. Faint, childlike. The group turned in unison, but there was no one there. Only the shadows, curling and stretching against the walls like smoke. Julia, the journalist, pressed her back to the wall. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That wasn't real. That wasn't real." But the sound came again, louder now. A small girl's voice, trembling, echoing through the room though no child was present. "Why did you leave me there?" Marcus's face collapsed into his hands. "Stop it," he shouted into the darkness. "Just stop." The others recoiled at the rawness in his tone. He wasn't just afraid. He was guilty. "Tell them." The stranger's voice whispered, closer now, right behind Marcus's ear. "Tell them the truth." Marcus whipped around, but no one stood there. The group could see it clearly. He was unraveling, his carefully composed mask torn away by invisible hands. Finally, Marcus shouted, "I didn't mean to leave her. I thought she was still alive. I thought—" The words caught in his throat. His voice cracked into sobs. The revelation struck the group like a physical blow. Marcus had a secret, a death, and now the stranger had torn it out of him for everyone to see. But before anyone could react, before they could demand details or recoil in horror, a loud slam echoed through the lodge. The front door had shut on its own, and with that sound, the room fell into total darkness. The fire extinguished as if snuffed by unseen hands, leaving them in pitch blackness. In the void, the stranger's whisper curled around each of them, coiling into their ears like smoke. "One by one, your truths will be mine." The storm outside had not eased. It raged with a violence that seemed to answer the chaos swelling within the cabin. Candles shuddered, their flames bending sideways, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. And the stranger, always silent, always still, watched them from the corner like a spider waiting for the web to tremble. No one dared speak his name anymore. He didn't offer one, and yet his eyes had named them all. Elena, the nurse. It began with Elena. She had been sitting cross-legged near the fire, rocking slightly, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. The stranger's gaze locked on her, and her lips trembled as though words were being pulled out her throat against her will. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. Everyone turned. "What didn't you mean to do?" Father Miguel asked gently, but she didn't answer him. Her eyes never left the stranger. "I switched the chart," she muttered. Her voice cracked. "The patient. I gave the wrong medication. He didn't wake up again." Gasps rippled through the room. Elena covered her mouth with her shaking hands. "I never told anyone," she sobbed. "But he knows. He's been looking at me since the moment he came in." The stranger tilted his head ever so slightly, as if confirming her confession. Before they could comfort her, the weight of silence shifted. It fell on Samuel, the scarred soldier who had been standing by the boarded window like a guard. He clenched his jaw, muttering curses under his breath. "Don't," he growled. "Don't you dare." But the stranger did not speak, only stared. And Samuel, like Elena, began to shake. "I left them," he rasped suddenly, his fists trembling. "I left my unit. My brothers. We were ambushed and I ran." His voice broke into a shout. "I told the report differently. I said they were gone before I could help. But the truth is, I abandoned them." His knees buckled and he sank into the corner. Elena stared at him with horror, betrayal in her wide eyes. Now all eyes turned to Father Miguel. The air itself seemed to pressure him, pressing secrets out of his pores. He closed his eyes, gripping the rosary tight until his knuckles went white. When he finally spoke, his voice was not the calm, firm tone they had known. It was thin, broken. "I told her to keep quiet," he said. "The girl from my parish. She came to me, begging for help. She was pregnant, frightened, and I told her to endure, to be silent, because I didn't want a scandal." The room chilled. Even the storm seemed to pause for that moment. "She never came back to church," he whispered, tears streaking his face. "Her family moved. No one knows where she is. But he does." He pointed at the stranger, trembling. "He knows everything." Clara had been the calmest of them all, the one who soothed with soft words and teacherly patience. But now her mask cracked. Her voice came out shrill. "No, this isn't real. He's playing tricks." Yet her eyes darted, flickering with guilt, with memories. "I never hurt anyone," she insisted. "Never." The stranger's gaze hardened. Clara's denial shattered. Her lips trembled, and finally, in a rush, "I lied. I told him it was the boy's fault, that he started the fire." She gasped for air. "But it was me. I left the candle burning in the classroom. I didn't want to be blamed, so I let him carry it." His parents moved away in shame, thinking he was reckless. Her voice broke. "I ruined his life, and I told myself I was protecting my career." One by one, they had been gutted. Their confessions hung in the air like smoke, suffocating, poisonous. Each revelation left them more exposed, more fragile. The stranger had not spoken a word. He had not moved more than an inch. But their secrets were no longer theirs. Now they turned on each other. "You killed someone," Elena spat at Samuel. "And you ruined a child," Samuel snapped back. "You abandoned her," Clara shrieked at Father Miguel. "And you—" Father Miguel's voice was sharp as glass. "You let an innocent boy burn." The room descended into chaos, accusations shouting, trembling hands pointing. But under it all, the stranger's silence grew louder than their voices. And then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing inside the walls. But no one was moving. The stranger rose to his feet at last. The air in the lodge had grown unbearable, thick with suspicion and dread. No one trusted anyone anymore. Eyes darted, voices cracked, and every small sound, the creak of old wood, the snap of the fire, made them flinch. But when the thud came from upstairs, every head turned at once. "Who's up there?" whispered Eleanor, clutching her shawl tighter. "Probably just the storm loosening the beams," Harold muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. Then came another thud, heavy, deliberate, followed by the sound of slow, dragging footsteps across the ceiling. Everyone froze. "Don't you hear it?" gasped Anna. That's not wood. That's someone. Before anyone could stop him, Harold grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace. I've had enough of this. Whoever's trying to mess with us is going to regret it. His voice was shaky, but anger covered his fear. He stormed up the stairs, the others following reluctantly. Each creak under their feet sounded like a warning. At the top of the staircase, the hallway was swallowed in darkness. The only light came from the weak glow of a lantern Eleanor carried, its flame trembling in sync with her hands. "Which room?" Harold growled. Then slam. A door at the end of the hall swung shut with a force that rattled the walls. The guests gasped. "That one," whispered Anna. Harold didn't hesitate. He marched to the door, shoved it open, and froze. Inside was a figure. Tall, motionless, waiting. The stranger. No one had seen him this clearly until now. His face was obscured by the shadows, but the outline of his frame was inhumanly still, as though carved from the very darkness around him. "Who the hell are you?" Harold demanded, poker raised. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. Only a voice slipped through the silence, low, guttural, almost like a growl. "You brought your sins here. Now they must be paid for." The others shrank back, but Harold, trembling with both rage and fear, lunged forward, swinging the poker. The strike never landed. In a blur, the stranger moved, faster than any of them could follow. 1 second Harold's weapon was raised. The next it was wrenched from his grip and sent clattering across the floor. The stranger's hand closed around Harold's throat and slammed him against the wall. The lantern's flame flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows as Harold gasped and clawed at the stranger's grip. "Stop it. Let him go." Eleanor cried, her voice shrill with terror. The stranger tilted his head slightly, as though studying Harold's desperation. Then, in a voice like ice, "You lie to yourself, you lie to them." Harold's eyes bulged. What are you?" He choked, unable to finish. The stranger leaned closer, whispering something into Harold's ear that no one else could hear. Whatever was made Harold's face drain of color, his body trembling uncontrollably. Then, with sudden violence, the stranger hurled him across the room. Harold crashed into an old wardrobe, splintering wood as he collapsed in a heap, coughing and gasping for air. The guests screamed. Anna fell to her knees, weeping. Michael pulled her back as the stranger turned toward them. For the first time, the lantern's trembling flame illuminated part of his face. Pale, unnatural skin stretched too tightly, and eyes that glowed faintly, impossibly, with a cold, otherworldly light. No one moved. The stranger took 1 step forward. The floorboards groaned beneath him like they, too, feared his weight. Then darkness. The lantern extinguished on its own, and in the suffocating blackness, his voice slithered through their ears. "This is only the beginning." The sound of his footsteps receded, vanishing into the house, leaving behind silence and the sobs of broken guests who now knew this was no prank, no trick. This was something far worse. The stranger was real, and he had only just begun. The cabin felt smaller now, suffocating. The wind shrieked against the windows, rattling the glass as though the storm outside wanted in. But it wasn't the storm they feared. It was him, the stranger, that shadow in the corner of their vision, that figure who slipped in and out of the house without opening doors. Blood stained the floorboards where Daniel had been dragged screaming. No one spoke of it. They couldn't. Instead, panic erupted in a flurry of half-thought decisions. Board the doors, now. Claire snapped, grabbing the old table and heaving it against the entrance. Her voice cracked, but her hands were steady, desperate. Leo shoved chairs against the windows. "He's not human," he muttered, sweat soaking his shirt. "I saw him. I swear I saw him. He walked to the damn wall." "Shut up." Claire barked. "We keep him out. We stay together. That's the only way." But staying together was impossible. Fear gnawed through them like acid. Trust was evaporating faster than the warmth from the dwindling fire. Elena stood apart, trembling with something more than fear. Her eyes darted from Claire to Leo to Sarah, then back to the bloodstain. She whispered, "He knows us. He knows what we've done." Sarah's head snapped up, What are you talking about? But before Elena could answer, tap, 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 knuckles against the window. The stranger stood outside in the storm, head bowed, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Slowly, deliberately, he raised a hand and traced a finger down the foggy glass. It left no streak, just a mark black, like ink, like ash, that burned into the pane. Leo stumbled back. He's marking us. Suddenly the lamps flickered and died. In the dark came whispers, not one voice, but many, all speaking over each other. Their own voices, their own confessions, spat back at them from the walls. Claire froze. The whisper was hers. I buried her there. No one will ever know. Her heart stopped. That secret, her secret, wasn't supposed to exist outside her own head. Leo felt his knees as the whispers mocked him, screaming his shame aloud. Sarah slapped her hands over her ears as if to tear them off. The stranger didn't have to kill them. He was unraveling them piece by piece. And then, just when they thought they'd locked him out, the sound of boots echoed in the hall. Inside, the cabin felt smaller now, suffocating. The wind shrieked against the windows, rattling the glass as though the storm outside wanted in. But it wasn't the storm they feared. It was him, the stranger, that shadow in the corner of their vision, that figure who slipped in and out of the house without opening doors. Blood stained the floorboards where Daniel had been dragged screaming. No one spoke of it. They couldn't. Instead, panic erupted in a flurry of half-thought decisions. Board the doors, now! Claire snapped, grabbing the old table and heaving it against the entrance. Her voice cracked, but her hands were steady, desperate. Leo shoved chairs against the windows. He's not human, he muttered, sweat soaking his shirt. I saw him. I swear I saw him. He walked through the damn wall. Shut up. Claire barked. We keep him out. We stay together. That's the only way. But staying together was impossible. Fear gnawed through them like acid. Trust was evaporating faster than the warmth from the dwindling fire. Elena stood apart, trembling with something more than fear. Her eyes darted from Claire to Leo to Sarah, then back to the blood stain. She whispered, He knows us, he knows what we've done. Sarah's head snapped up. What are you talking about? But before Elena could answer, tap, 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 knuckles against the window. The stranger stood outside in the storm, head bowed, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Slowly, deliberately, he raised a hand and traced a finger down the foggy glass. It left no streak, just a mark, black, like ink, like ash, that burned into pain. Leo stumbled back. He's marking us. Suddenly the lamps flickered and died. In the dark came whispers, not one voice, but many, all speaking over each other. Their own voices, their own confessions, spat back at them from the walls. Claire froze. The whisper was hers. I buried her there. No one will ever know. Her heart stopped. That secret, her secret, wasn't supposed to exist outside her own head. Leo fell to his knees as the whispers mocked him, screaming his shame aloud. Sarah slapped her hands over her ears as if to tear them off. The stranger didn't have to kill them. He was unraveling them piece by piece. And then, just when they thought they'd locked him out, the sound of boots echoed in the hall. Inside, the group scattered. Panic became chaos. Claire lunged for the fire poker, clutching it so tightly her knuckles split. Leo shoved Elena toward the back of the cabin, screaming, Run! Find a way out. But the doors they barricaded now creaked open on their own. The wood splintered as though the boards had rotted to dust in seconds. The storm howled inside, bringing with it a cold so sharp it stole their breath. The stranger moved through the open door. He wasn't wet from the rain. Not a drop touched him. His voice was calm, quieter than the storm. You brought yourselves here. I didn't. Sarah, trembling, lifted a chair to swing it, but it was ripped from her hands by nothing she could see and shattered against the wall. She screamed. Elena pressed against the far corner, whispering prayers. But the stranger stopped in front of her. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his hat. No face, just shadow. Endless, shifting, writhing shadow. Elena broke. She sobbed and confessed, voice shaking. I killed him. I hit him with a car and left him there. I thought no one saw. The stranger crouched low, faceless void inches from hers. I saw. She collapsed, shrieking, clutching her head as if her skull were splitting. Her cries echoed too long, stretching unnaturally, reverberating through the house until it didn't sound like her anymore. It sounded like dozens of voices screaming at once. Leo tried to drag her away, but her body was limp, eyes wide, glassy. She was gone, and that's when Claire realized the truth. He wasn't killing them. He was collecting them. One by one. The storm outside had dulled to a moaning wind, but inside the mansion it was war. The grand hallway was barricaded with splintered furniture, portraits torn from the walls, and a heavy oak dining table shoved against the main doors. Yet still the sound of footsteps echoed inside, deliberate, unhurried, mocking. Leo, sweat dripping down his temple, leaned against the barricade and clutched the fire poker like a soldier clutching a bayonet. His once polished calm had been stripped to raw nerves, his breath ragged. Across the hall, Sarah sat curled against the wall, knees pressed to her chest, muttering words no one could understand. Her eyes darted like a trapped animal, wide, glassy. Claire, bleeding from a shallow gash across her arm, hovered near the candlelight, her face pale but set with determination. She had been the one to drag Sarah away from a broken window earlier, saving her from bolting into the storm. For the first time since this nightmare began, the three of them, Claire, Leo, Sarah, were the only ones left breathing. The others had been claimed, one by one, and now the stranger was letting them stew in silence, like a predator savoring the final chase. A crash upstairs shattered the tense quiet. All three of them flinched. Sarah snapped up, pointing a trembling finger toward the stairs. He's up there. He's waiting. He's always waiting. Shut up. Leo barked, his voice cracking. You'll bring him straight down here. Claire rounded on him, fire her eyes. Don't you dare blame her. She's terrified. We all are. Oh, you think you're the only one who gets to play protector? Leo snarled, stepping closer. You've been bossing us around since the start, like you're the only one who can save anyone. Guess what? Everyone you tried to save is dead. The words hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer until her face was inches from his. Maybe they're dead because of you, because you freeze, because you think too damn much before acting. Sarah's whimper cut through their standoff. He's here. Both turned. The candlelight flickered. The barricade creaked. And from the other side of the heavy oak table came a low, deliberate knock. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed through the hall like a heartbeat. For the first time since the horror began, a voice slithered through the darkness. Deep, calm, resonant. You've done well lasting this long. Claire froze, her heart pounding. The voice wasn't muffled by the barricade. It was everywhere, filling the hall, vibrating in the air itself. Leo gripped the poker tighter. Show yourself, you bastard. A soft chuckle. I already have. Again and again. But you never really see until it's too late. Sarah screamed, covering her ears. Stop it. Stop it. You don't exist. You're not real. Oh, Sarah. The voice crooned. You're the one who called me here. You wanted punishment. You wanted your guilt to end. Claire shot her a stunned look. Sarah, what does he mean? But Sarah was rocking back and forth, sobbing. The stranger continued, patient, relentless. Each of you brought me here. Each of you carries rot. I simply peel it back, strip the mask, force you to face what you've done. Lies! Leo shouted, though his voice shook. You're just some psychopath playing games. Another knock on the barricade, louder this time. The oak table groaned under the force. Claire felt it then, not just fear, but the creeping sense that he was telling the truth, that this wasn't random, that the stranger hadn't stumbled on them in this storm. They were chosen, and the reasons lay buried in their pasts. Without warning, the candle guttered out. Darkness swallowed them whole. Then, from the second floor, every door slammed at once. A thunderous, bone-rattling sound that shook dust from the rafters. Sarah shrieked. Leo cursed. Claire grabbed blindly, finding Sarah's trembling hand. The voice whispered again, so close it brushed her ear. "Run, little mice. Run while you still can." The barricade burst inward with a crash, oak splinters flying like shrapnel. The stranger stepped into the hall, and for the first time they saw his face, or what remained of one. The storm outside had died to a muffled whimper, but inside the mansion the air was thick with dread. The house seemed to breathe with him, every creak and shift of timber echoing like a warning. Claire, Leo, and Sarah were the only ones left, splintered fragments of a group that once dared laughter here. Now, their faces were carved from panic and exhaustion. They had barricaded themselves in the study, shoving furniture against the door, but the silence beyond was worse than any pounding fist. The stranger was still out there, watching, waiting. Sarah sat slumped in a velvet chair, her hands trembling, lips muttering half-formed prayers. Claire crouched by the barricade, knife gripped in a white-knuckled hand. Leo paced in a slow, maddening rhythm, like a caged animal. Then it began, a soft whistle, low, tuneless, drifting through the darkened halls. The kind of sound you could almost dismiss, except it grew nearer, threading through the silence like smoke. Sarah clapped her hands over her ears, whimpering. Claire's chest tightened. Leo stopped pacing. His voice cracked. He's toying with us again. He could have killed us already. Why doesn't he just... Because it's not about killing, Claire whispered. It's about breaking us. The whistling stopped. A knock, gentle, patient, on the other side of the barricaded door. Leo, a voice crooned. Smooth, familiar, still hiding behind the others? Just like before. Just like you left them to drown. Leo's face blanched. His eyes darted to Claire, then away. "Shut up," he muttered. His voice grew louder. "Shut up." Sarah flinched at the outburst. What is he talking about? But Claire already saw it. The guilt in Leo's eyes. The stranger wasn't inventing lies. He was peeling them open. The door shuddered, as if something heavy pressed against it. Though it groaned, the barricade rattled. Sarah screamed, bolting from her chair toward the corner, clawing at the shelves like a trapped bird. "Stay together." Claire snapped, but her voice sounded thin. Then, impossibly, the stranger was inside. No crash of wood, no broken hinges. Just there, standing in the far corner of the room, black coat blending with shadow, mask gleaming pale in the firelight. He hadn't forced his way in. He'd always had a way in. Sarah shrieked and scrambled backward, but the stranger raised a hand, not in threat but silence. The gesture froze her, as if he had pressed cold fingers to her throat. He turned his mask toward Leo. "Confess." "I don't know what you're talking about." The stranger took a step forward, and Leo buckled, collapsing to his knees. Words tore from him, ugly and broken. "I left them. My crew, my friends, when the boat went down. I saved myself." His voice broke into sobs. "I didn't even try to help them." The stranger tilted his head, satisfied, then turned to Sarah. She was already shaking her head, babbling, No, I didn't do anything. I swear I didn't do anything." "That," the stranger whispered, "is your sin." And she screamed as if the words themselves were knives. Claire lunged, knife raised, but the stranger moved faster than she thought possible. A single motion, and Leo's cries cut off, his body crumpling, limp. Sarah clawed at her face, as if invisible hands were tearing it away. She collapsed beside Leo, her scream thinning into a choking gasp. Now only Claire remained, standing the ruin of her companions, the knife slick in her grip. Her breath came in ragged gulps. The stranger's mask was fixed on her. "You," he said, voice soft, "already know why you're here." Claire's knees trembled. Images flooded her mind. Things she had buried, lies she had told, people she had abandoned for her own survival. She shook her head violently, gripping the knife tighter. "No, I'm not like them. I'm not." The stranger stepped closer, until she could feel the cold weight of his presence pressing against her skin. "You are worse." Claire slashed out wildly. Steel met nothing but air. The stranger didn't even flinch. He leaned close, the mask inches from her ear, and whispered the truth she had spent years burying. It left her hollow, gutted, her legs giving way beneath her. The knife slipped from her hand. When she looked up, the stranger was gone. The room was empty except for the bodies of Leo and Sarah, sprawled in silent accusation. The fire had gone out. Darkness swallowed everything. Claire stumbled through the mansion, calling out, sobbing, but no answer came. Only silence, only her shame, echoing through the empty halls. By dawn, she was the last survivor, but she hadn't won. She staggered out of the mansion into gray morning light, face streaked with tears and ash, the stranger's final whisper still burning in her ears. The truth wasn't that he had killed the others. The truth was that he had shown them who they really were. And that was worse.